The coffee mug slipped from my fingers when I saw her standing in our living room doorway. Samantha, my wife of 8 years, wore a skirt so short it barely qualified as clothing. The black fabric clung to her hips like paint, ending somewhere around her mid-thigh. Her silk blouse was unbuttoned one button too many, revealing the lace of her expensive bra. "Where exactly are you going dressed like that?" I asked, my voice steady despite the shock coursing through me. Sam's green eyes flashed with defiance. She crossed her arms, pushing her chest forward deliberately. "I have an important meeting with my new supervisor today. You wouldn't understand. It requires confidence and professionalism." "Professionalism?" I couldn't help the sarcastic edge creeping into my voice. "Sam, you look like you're heading to a nightclub, not a marketing firm." Her face twisted into that familiar expression of contempt I'd been seeing more often lately. "You know what your problem is, Alec? You're not a real man. Real men don't try to control what their wives wear. They support their ambitions." The words hit like a slap, but I kept my expression neutral. After 15 years in construction, dealing with difficult contractors and impossible deadlines, I'd learned to hide my emotions behind a mask of calm professionalism. A real man, huh? Interesting perspective. She grabbed her designer purse, one I'd worked overtime to buy her for Christmas, and headed toward the door. "Don't wait up. This meeting might run late, and afterward, there's a company dinner I need to attend." The front door slammed with enough force to rattle the windows. I stood there in my work clothes, faded jeans and a flannel shirt, staring at the space where my wife had been. The woman who used to wear conservative business suits and ask my opinion on her outfits. The woman who used to come home excited to tell me about her day. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. A text from Tommy Baird, my best friend since high school and now owner of a small security company. "Still need that background check we talked about?" I'd mentioned Ryan Caldwell to Tommy weeks ago, Sam's new supervisor who'd transferred from the Portland office. Something about the guy rubbed me wrong, though I couldn't put my finger on it. Maybe it was how Sam's entire demeanor had changed since he arrived, how she started working late, buying new clothes, and treating me like an inconvenience. "Yeah," I typed back. "Ryan Caldwell. Works at Coastal Marketing Solutions. Give me 48 hours. I pocketed the phone and walked to the window overlooking our driveway. Sam's red sedan was already gone, leaving tire marks on the asphalt. Mrs. Greeley, our 70-something neighbor, was watering her garden while obviously watching our house. She caught my eye and waved, her expression sympathetic. The woman had eyes like a hawk and ears like a satellite dish. Nothing happened in our neighborhood without her knowledge. The house felt different without Sam's presence. Quieter, but also somehow lighter. I made myself another cup of coffee and sat at our kitchen table, looking around at the life we'd built together. The mortgage we'd scraped together to afford, the furniture we'd picked out during happier times, the photos on the refrigerator from vacations and anniversaries. When had it all started falling apart? My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. The caller ID showed my foreman's number. "Alec, we've got a problem at the Morrison site." Jake's voice crackled through the speaker. "The electrical inspection failed. We need you here ASAP. Work." At least that still made sense. At least when I swung a hammer or read blueprints, the world operated according to logical rules. Unlike my marriage, which seemed to be governed by some twisted physics I couldn't understand. "On my way," I said, grabbing my keys and tool belt. As I backed out of the driveway, I noticed Mrs. Greeley had moved closer to the fence separating our properties. She gave me another wave, this one more deliberate. I rolled down my window. "Everything all right, dear?" she asked, her voice carrying that tone older women use when they know something you don't. "Just heading to work, Mrs. Greeley." She nodded slowly, her gray eyes studying my face. "That wife of yours left in quite a hurry this morning. All dressed up for something special, I imagine." There was something in her tone, a hint that she knew more than she was saying. Mrs. Greeley had lived in this neighborhood for 30 years. She knew everyone's business, often before they knew it themselves. "Business meeting," I said simply. "Mm-hmm." She adjusted her gardening gloves. "Well, you have a good day at work, Alec. And remember, sometimes the people closest to us are the hardest to see clearly." I drove to the job site with her words echoing in my mind. The Morrison project was a custom home renovation, the kind of work I enjoyed because it required both technical skill and creative problem-solving. But today, even the familiar rhythm of construction couldn't distract me from the growing unease in my chest. By lunchtime, Tommy called with preliminary information about Ryan Caldwell. "Your wife's boss is an interesting character," Tommy said. 36 years old, divorced twice, originally from Boston, made some enemies at his last job, something about inappropriate relationships with subordinates. My grip tightened on the phone. What kind of inappropriate relationships? The kind that end with harassment settlements and quiet resignations. Guys got a pattern, Alec. Targets married women, usually ones going through rough patches at home. The pieces started clicking into place like a blueprint, finally making sense. Sam's sudden interest in her appearance. The late nights, the way she'd been picking fights with me over trivial things as if she was trying to justify something to herself. Keep digging, I told Tommy. I need to know everything. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. That evening, I sat in my workshop behind the house, pretending to organize tools while actually planning my next move. The workshop had always been my sanctuary, a place where I could think clearly and work with my hands. The walls were lined with equipment I'd collected over years of construction work, from basic hammers to sophisticated measuring devices. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Thought you should know. Your wife is at the Riptide Bar on Harbor Street. She's not alone. I stared at the message for a long moment. Someone was looking out for me, though I couldn't guess who. The Riptide was a dive bar near the marina, the kind of place locals went to drink cheap beer and avoid their problems. It wasn't the sort of establishment where marketing executives held business dinners. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the truck. The drive to Harbor Street took 15 minutes, giving me plenty of time to consider my options. I could confront them directly, but that would give Sam ammunition for whatever narrative she was constructing about our marriage. I could turn around and go home, pretend I never got the message, or I could gather information first, approach this like the strategic problem it was becoming. The Riptide sat on a corner lot, its neon sign flickering against the early evening darkness. Through the windows, I could see the usual crowd of fishermen, dock workers, and locals seeking refuge from their daily troubles. And in a corner booth, I spotted my wife. Sam sat across from a man I recognized from the photo on Coastal Marketing's website, Ryan Caldwell. He was everything I wasn't. Polished, expensive suit, perfect haircut, and the kind of confident smile that came from never having to worry about making rent. His hand rested on the table inches from Sam's, and she was leaning forward, laughing at something he'd said. They looked comfortable together, intimate. I parked across the street and watched through my windshield, feeling like a private investigator in some noir film. Except this wasn't entertainment. This was my life, unraveling in real time. Ryan signaled the waitress for another round. Sam checked her phone, then looked around the bar nervously. She was worried about being seen, which told me everything I needed to know about the nature of their business dinner. My phone rang. Sam's name appeared on the caller ID. "Hey, honey." Her voice sounded artificially bright. "Just wanted to let you know the dinner is running really late. Don't wait up for me." Through the window, I watched her lips move as she spoke the lies. Ryan was grinning, apparently amused by her deception. "No problem," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Work hard." She ended the call and immediately leaned closer to Ryan, whispering something that made him laugh. His hand moved to cover hers on the table. I'd seen enough. I sat in my truck for another 10 minutes, watching my wife flirt with her supervisor while she thought I was safely at home. The rational part of my mind cataloged details. The way she touched her hair when she laughed, how she'd angled her body toward him, the fact that she'd lied so easily about her whereabouts. The emotional part of my mind felt like it was being fed through a wood chipper. Finally, I got out of the truck and walked across the street. The Riptide's interior was exactly what you'd expect. Dim lighting, scarred wooden tables, and the smell of fried food and spilled beer. A few regulars sat at the bar, nursing drinks and watching a baseball game on the mounted television. Country music played softly from speakers mounted in the corners. Sam and Ryan were so absorbed in their conversation that they didn't notice me until I was standing beside their booth. Well, I said, sliding into the seat next to Sam before either of them could react. "Fancy meeting you here." Sam's face went white, then flushed red. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Ryan, to his credit, recovered more quickly, though I noticed his hand jerked away from Sam's as if he'd been burned. "Alec," Sam stammered. We were just having a business dinner," I finished for her. "At a dive bar. How very professional." Ryan straightened his tie and attempted a confident smile. "Mr. Harper, I presume? I'm Ryan Caldwell, Sam's supervisor. We were indeed discussing some upcoming projects over dinner." "Is that what we're calling it?" I signaled the waitress and ordered a beer, settling back in my seat like I planned to stay a while. Funny thing about business dinners, they usually involve food. I don't see any plates on this table. "We already ate," Sam said quickly. "We were just having drinks and talking about the quarterly projections." Quarterly projections, I repeated, letting the sarcasm drip from my voice. How fascinating. Tell me, Ryan, do you always conduct business meetings by holding hands with your married employees? Ryan's confident facade cracked slightly. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Oh, I understand perfectly. My beer arrived, and I took a long sip while studying both of them. My wife told me she was working late, then called to say she was at a company dinner. Instead, I find her at the local dive bar, dressed like she's auditioning for a music video, getting cozy with her boss. What exactly am I misunderstanding? Several other patrons had started paying attention to our conversation. The Riptide wasn't a large place, and voices carried. Sam noticed the attention and shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Alec, please, she whispered urgently. You're making a scene. Am I? Sorry about that. I raised my voice slightly. I'd hate for anyone to get the wrong impression about your business practices, Ryan. Ryan's face was getting red now. He leaned forward, trying to project authority. Look, Harper, I don't know what you think you saw, but I saw my wife lying to me while she plays footsie with her supervisor. I stood up abruptly, and Ryan flinched backward. Here's some free advice from a working man to a corporate climber. Touch my wife again, and I'll redecorate your fancy car with a crowbar. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Ryan's mouth worked silently, and I could practically see him calculating whether I was serious. The answer was yes, though I had no intention of actually vandalizing anyone's property. Yet. You're crazy, Ryan finally managed. Maybe, but I'm the kind of crazy that has nothing left to lose. I finished my beer in one long gulp and set the empty bottle down harder than necessary. Enjoy the rest of your business meeting? I walked toward the door, hearing Sam's chair scrape against the floor as she hurried to follow me. The other patrons watched with the interest of people who'd stumbled onto better entertainment than the baseball game. Alec, wait! Sam caught up to me in the parking lot. Let me explain. I turned to face her, and she took a step backward. Whatever she saw in my expression made her reconsider her approach. There's nothing to explain, Sam. You lied to me, you're having an affair, and you just got caught. Pretty straightforward situation. I'm not having an affair. The words came out too loud, too desperate. Ryan and I are just friends. We work together, and yes, sometimes we grab drinks after work, but it's not what you think. Friends don't hold hands in dark corners of dive bars. We weren't holding hands. I have eyes, Sam. She tried a different tactic, stepping closer and softening her voice. Alec, honey, I know how this must look, but you're overreacting. Ryan is my supervisor, yes, but he's also been a good friend during a difficult time in our marriage. A difficult time? The laugh that escaped me had no humor in it. Our marriage was fine until Ryan showed up. Suddenly you're working late every night, buying new clothes, and treating me like an inconvenience. That's not true, isn't it? When's the last time we had dinner together? When's the last time you asked about my day, or told me about yours without lying? When's the last time you looked at me the way you were looking at him in there? Sam's face crumpled, and for a moment I thought she might actually tell me the truth. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin defiantly. You want to know the truth? Fine. Yes, I've been spending time with Ryan. Yes, I enjoy his company. He treats me like an intelligent, attractive woman instead of a piece of furniture. He listens when I talk. He makes me feel alive again. Each word was like a punch to the gut, but I kept my expression neutral. And that justifies lying to me? I lied because I knew you'd react exactly like this. You'd get jealous and possessive and try to control who I spend time with. I'm not trying to control you, Sam. I'm trying to save our marriage. Maybe our marriage isn't worth saving. The words hung between us like a challenge. In the distance, I could hear the sound of waves against the marina docks and the muffled noise from inside the bar. A car passed on Harbor Street, its headlights briefly illuminating Sam's face. She looked like a stranger. Is that really how you feel? I asked quietly. For a moment, her expression softened. Alec, Sam? Ryan appeared in the doorway of the bar, his voice uncertain. Everything okay out here? The moment shattered. Sam's face hardened again, and she turned toward Ryan like a flower seeking sunlight. Everything's fine, she called back. Alec was just leaving. I looked at my wife, really looked at her. The woman I'd married 8 years ago would never have chosen a stranger over her husband in a public parking lot. The woman I'd fallen in love with would have been mortified by this entire situation. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. You're right, I said finally. I am leaving, but this conversation isn't over. I walked to my truck without looking back, though I could feel both of them watching me. As I drove away, I saw them in my rearview mirror, standing close together in the parking lot, probably discussing what had just happened. The drive home gave me time to think, and by the time I pulled into my driveway, I'd made several decisions. First, I wasn't going to beg or plead or try to win Sam back with grand gestures. Second, I wasn't going to pretend this hadn't happened or hope it would blow over. And third, I was going to find out exactly what I was dealing with before I decided how to respond. Mrs. Greeley's porch light was on, and I could see her silhouette in her front window. She'd probably witnessed my hasty departure and would be curious about the outcome. Tomorrow, I'd have a conversation with her. Tonight, I had other priorities. I parked in the garage and went straight to my workshop. From a locked drawer in my workbench, I retrieved a small digital recorder I'd bought years ago for documenting job site problems. I tested the battery and recording quality, then slipped it into my shirt pocket. If Sam wanted to play games, I'd make sure I understood all the rules. I didn't sleep much that night. Sam came home around midnight, slipping into bed like she was trying not to wake me. She needn't have bothered. I was wide awake, staring at the ceiling and listening to her careful movements. She lay on her side with her back to me, maintaining the pretense that everything was normal. The next morning, she was gone before I woke up, leaving only a coffee-stained mug in the sink and the lingering scent of her expensive perfume. A note on the kitchen counter read, "Working late again tonight. Important project deadline." I crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash, then made my own coffee and sat down to plan my day. First stop, Mrs. Greeley. If anyone knew the neighborhood gossip, it would be her. I found her in her garden, tending to the roses that bordered our shared property line. She looked up when I approached, her weathered face creasing into a knowing smile. "Good morning, Alec. Beautiful day, isn't it?" "Morning, Mrs. Greeley. Your roses are looking good this year." "Thank you, dear. I've been using a new fertilizer." She straightened slowly, brushing dirt from her gardening gloves. "I couldn't help but notice some tension at your house lately." Here was my opening. Mrs. Greeley was old school. She believed in marriage and family values. If I played this right, she might become an ally. "Sam and I are going through a rough patch," I admitted. "I'm trying to figure out what's going on." Mrs. Greeley nodded sympathetically. "Marriage is hard work, takes commitment from both parties." She paused, studying my face. "I've seen that supervisor of hers pick her up a few times. Fancy car, expensive clothes, not the kind of man who understands the value of hard work." My pulse quickened. "He's been here? To the house?" "Oh, yes. 3 times in the past 2 weeks, always when you're at work. Last Tuesday, he waited in his car while she ran inside to change clothes, came back out wearing that short black dress, you know the one." I knew the one. I'd bought it for her birthday last year, and she'd worn it exactly once before claiming it was too fancy for anywhere we went. "Did they seem friendly?" I asked carefully. Mrs. Greeley's expression grew disapproving. "Friendly isn't the word I'd use. She got in that car like she was going somewhere special, and when she came home the next morning... The next morning? Around 7 a.m., still wearing the same dress but looking like she'd slept in it." Mrs. Greeley shook her head sadly. "I'm sorry, Alec. I debated whether to tell you." The confirmation hit me like a physical blow, but I kept my voice steady. "I appreciate your honesty, Mrs. Greeley." "What are you going to do?" "Good question." "I'm still figuring that out." She reached over the fence and patted my arm with a dirt-stained glove. "You're a good man, Alec Harper. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." I thanked her and headed to work, but my mind was spinning. Sam hadn't just been having drinks with Ryan. She'd been sleeping with him, in our bed, in his apartment. The details mattered less than the reality. That my marriage was over, even if Sam hadn't officially ended it yet. At the job site, I threw myself into physical labor, using the rhythm of hammer and saw to quiet the chaos in my head. Around noon, Tommy called with more information about Ryan Caldwell. "Your boy Ryan is a real piece of work," Tommy said. "I talked to a contact at his previous job in Portland. Guy left under suspicious circumstances. Harassment complaint from a married employee. The company settled quietly to avoid bad publicity." "What happened to the employee?" "Divorced 6 months later. Lost her job, her house, and custody of her kids when her husband proved she'd been having an affair." The pattern was becoming clear. Ryan targeted married women, seduced them, then moved on when things got complicated. The women were left to deal with the wreckage of their lives. There's more," Tommy continued. "I did some digging into his finances. Guy's leverage to the hilt. Fancy apartment, expensive car, designer clothes, all financed with credit and loans. He's one missed payment away from losing everything." "Interesting. What else?" "He's got a gambling problem. Owes money to some serious people in Portland. Word is, he took the job here to get away from his creditors." I filed away this information for future use. A man with financial problems and a history of workplace misconduct was vulnerable in ways he probably didn't realize. "Keep digging," I told Tommy. "I want to know everything. Where he lives, what he drives, who he associates with, what his weaknesses are. Alec, what are you planning?" "I'm not sure yet, but when I figure it out, I want to be prepared." That evening, I set up my surveillance. I parked down the street from Coastal Marketing Solutions and waited. Sam's car was in the lot, along with several others. At 6:30, most of the employees left for the day. At 7, Sam and Ryan emerged together, walking close and talking intimately. They got into Ryan's car, a silver BMW that probably cost more than I made in a year, and drove toward downtown. I followed at a distance, feeling like a character in a detective novel. They went to an upscale restaurant, the kind of place Sam and I could never afford on my construction salary. I parked across the street and watched through the restaurant's windows as they shared an intimate dinner. Ryan ordered wine, and Sam laughed at his jokes. He reached across the table to touch her hand, and she didn't pull away. Around 9 o'clock, they left the restaurant and drove to Ryan's apartment complex, a modern building with a doorman and valet parking. Sam got out of the car like she belonged there, like she'd done it many times before. I sat in my truck in the parking lot, staring up at the building and wondering which window belonged to Ryan's apartment. Somewhere up there, my wife was betraying our marriage vows. Again. My phone buzzed with a text from Sam. "Project meeting running very late. Don't wait up." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Work hard." The lie came so easily to her now. I wondered when she'd become such an accomplished deceiver, or if I'd simply been too trusting to notice before. I drove home and went straight to my workshop. From my toolbox, I retrieved a small GPS tracking device Tommy had given me years ago for keeping tabs on expensive equipment at job sites. It was about the size of a matchbox and had a magnetic base designed to stick to metal surfaces. Tomorrow, I'd plant it on Ryan's car. If Sam wanted to play games, I'd make sure I knew all the rules. But first, I had a phone call to make. I pulled out my cell and dialed the number for Coastal Marketing Solutions. The after-hours voicemail system answered, and I navigated to the company directory. When I found the listing for the company president, I wrote down his direct number. Mr. Ellison was going to be very interested to learn about his supervisor's extracurricular activities with married employees. I spent the rest of the evening researching Ryan Caldwell online. Social media profiles, professional networking sites, public records. I gathered every piece of information I could find. By midnight, I had a comprehensive dossier on the man who was destroying my marriage. Ryan Caldwell was 36 years old, originally from Boston, divorced twice with no children. He'd worked at 3 different marketing firms in the past 5 years, leaving each job under circumstances that weren't entirely clear from public records. His LinkedIn profile boasted about his relationship-building skills and ability to motivate team members. His Facebook page was a catalog of expensive restaurants, luxury vacations, and photos with attractive women who were never identified. He projected an image of success and sophistication, but Tommy's financial research suggested it was all smoke and mirrors. The man was a predator, and Sam was his latest victim, but unlike his previous targets, Sam was married to someone who wasn't going to roll over and accept defeat. I was still awake when Sam came home at 2 a.m., moving quietly through the house like a burglar. She slipped into bed without saying a word, maintaining the fiction that she'd been working late at the office. I lay there in the darkness, listening to her breathe, and made my final decision about how to handle this situation. I wasn't going to confront her again, wasn't going to beg her to choose me over Ryan, wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me broken. Instead, I was going to destroy both of them systematically and completely. The construction business had taught me patience, planning, and the importance of having the right tools for every job. This was just another project, and like all my projects, I intended to finish it properly. The next morning, Sam was gone before dawn, leaving only the scent of her perfume and another lie scrawled on a sticky note. Early meeting, home late again. I smiled as I crumpled the note. Her predictability was going to make this easier. At 7 a.m., I called in sick to work, something I'd done maybe 5 times in 15 years. Jake, my foreman, was surprised but didn't question it. I had a reputation for reliability, which meant I'd earned the benefit of the doubt. By 8 o'clock, I was parked outside Ryan's apartment complex, watching the valet parking area through binoculars. The BMW sat in its assigned spot, gleaming silver in the morning sunlight. At 8:30, Ryan emerged from the building wearing an expensive suit and carrying a leather briefcase. He looked every inch the successful executive, though I now knew it was mostly an illusion. He handed his keys to the valet and walked toward the street, probably heading to a nearby coffee shop. This was my chance. I approached the valet, a kid who couldn't have been more than 20, and flashed him a friendly smile. "Excuse me, I'm supposed to meet my brother-in-law, Ryan Caldwell, here, but I think I'm early. Mind if I wait by his car?" The kid glanced at the BMW, then back at me. "You family?" "Brother-in-law," I repeated, maintaining my casual tone. "He's dating my sister. You know how it is? Family obligations." The valet shrugged and turned his attention back to his phone. Close enough. I walked over to the BMW, admiring its pristine condition. Ryan clearly spent considerable time and money maintaining his image. I crouched down beside the rear bumper, pretending to tie my shoe while I attached the GPS tracker to the underside of the car. The magnetic base clicked into place with a satisfying snap. "Nice ride," I commented to the valet as I walked past. "Yeah, Mr. Caldwell takes good care of it. Washes it twice a week." "Sounds like him?" I agreed, though privately I was thinking that a man who washed his car twice a week had too much time on his hands. Phase 1 complete. Now I could track Ryan's movements in real time, which would help me anticipate his next moves with Sam. My next stop was the offices of Coastal Marketing Solutions. The company occupied the third floor of a modern office building downtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows and an open-plan layout that screamed creative workspace. Through the windows, I could see employees at their desks, including Sam, who was typing intently at her computer. I took the elevator to the fourth floor and found the building directory. Coastal Marketing's parent company, Atlantic Business Solutions, had its headquarters in Boston. The local office was just a satellite operation, which meant decisions about personnel issues would likely be made at the corporate level. From the fourth-floor landing, I had a clear view into Coastal Marketing's office space. I could see Sam at her desk, Ryan in his glass-walled office, and the general layout of the workspace. More importantly, I could see that Ryan's office had a clear view of Sam's desk, the predator keeping watch over his prey. I spent an hour observing their interactions. Ryan emerged from his office several times, always finding excuses to stop by Sam's desk. He'd lean over her shoulder to look at her computer screen, his hand resting casually on her chair. She'd tilt her head toward him when he spoke, smiling at comments that probably weren't that funny. Their body language told the whole story. They were comfortable with each other in a way that went far beyond professional courtesy. Sam touched her hair when Ryan approached, a gesture I recognized from our early dating days. Ryan's eyes lingered on her when he thought no one was looking. They weren't even trying to hide it, which suggested they'd grown careless. Arrogant, even. That carelessness would be their downfall. Around noon, I drove to the Riptide bar and struck up a conversation with the bartender, a grizzled man named Eddie who looked like he'd been pouring drinks since Prohibition. "You were here the other night," Eddie said, recognizing me immediately. "Had some words with that fancy guy and his lady friend." "That's right. Mind if I ask you something?" Eddie shrugged. "Shoot." "How often do they come in here?" "The fancy guy and the redhead? Maybe once a week for the past month. Always sit in that corner booth. Always order the same thing. Wine for her, scotch for him. They tip decent, so I don't ask questions." "What do you think of them?" Eddie's weathered face creased into a knowing smirk. "I think she's married, and he's not her husband. I think they picked this place because they figure nobody they know would come to a dive bar. And I think they're both playing with fire." "Why do you say that?" "Because married women who sneak around in bars like this one always get burned eventually. And guys like him, all flash and no substance, they run when things get complicated." Eddie's assessment matched my own observations. Ryan was a coward who preyed on vulnerable women, and Sam was making the classic mistake of thinking she was special. "What would you do if you were in my position?" I asked. Eddie considered this while wiping down a glass. "Depends what kind of man you are. Some guys would fight for their woman, others would just walk away. Me, I'd make sure they both got what they deserved." "And what would that be?" "Public humiliation. Nothing hurts people like them more than having their dirty laundry aired in front of everyone they're trying to impress." I thanked Eddie and left a generous tip. His advice aligned with my own instincts. Ryan and Sam were vulnerable to exposure because they cared so much about appearances. That afternoon, I visited 3 more locations: Ryan's bank, his dry cleaner, and the upscale gym where he maintained his membership. At each stop, I gathered small pieces of information about his routines and habits. The bank teller mentioned that he'd been asking about loan extensions. The dry cleaner's owner complained about his overdue account. The gym receptionist noted that his membership was set to expire next month. Tommy's assessment had been accurate. Ryan was living beyond his means, maintaining an expensive lifestyle through credit and borrowed money. He was financially vulnerable, which gave me leverage I could use when the time was right. By evening, I had a comprehensive understanding of both Ryan's and Sam's daily routines. The GPS tracker showed that Ryan had gone from his apartment to the office to an expensive lunch restaurant to the office again, predictable patterns that would make planning easier. I drove home and found another note from Sam. Working late on big presentation. We'll grab dinner at office. According to the GPS tracker, Ryan's car was parked at an Italian restaurant across town. I made myself a sandwich and settled in to wait. At 10:30, my phone buzzed with a text from the same unknown number that had tipped me off about the riptide. They're at his apartment again. Thought you should know. This time, I didn't drive over to confirm what I already knew. Instead, I opened my laptop and began composing an email to Mr. Ellison, the president of Coastal Marketing Solutions. Dear Mr. Ellison, I typed, I'm writing to bring to your attention some concerning behavior by one of your supervisors, Ryan Caldwell. I spent an hour crafting the email, making sure to sound like a concerned citizen rather than a jealous husband. I detailed Ryan's pattern of inappropriate relationships with married employees, referenced his history at previous jobs, and suggested that the company might want to investigate before facing potential liability issues. I didn't send the email, not yet, but I saved it in my drafts folder, ready to deploy when the timing was right. Next, I created a fake social media profile using a stock photo and generic information. It took some technical maneuvering, but I managed to send friend requests to several of Sam's coworkers, including Melissa Carr, who I knew from office parties was the biggest gossip in the company. Melissa accepted the friend request within an hour, probably assuming I was someone she'd met at a networking event. Through her social media posts, I gained access to the inner workings of office politics at Coastal Marketing. She posted constantly about work drama, upcoming events, and interpersonal conflicts among the staff. Her most recent post was particularly interesting. Some people need to remember that the office is a professional environment, not a dating service. Just saying. The post had attracted several comments from other employees, most of them using coded language to discuss relationships and inappropriate behavior. It was clear that Sam and Ryan's affair wasn't as secret as they thought. Their coworkers had noticed and were talking about it. Perfect. Office gossip would amplify whatever action I decided to take. At midnight, Sam came home and went through her usual routine of trying not to wake me. This time, I was genuinely asleep, exhausted from a day of reconnaissance and planning. But I woke up when she whispered into her phone in the bathroom. I can't keep doing this, Ryan. Alec is getting suspicious, and people at work are starting to talk. I couldn't hear Ryan's response, but Sam's side of the conversation told me everything I needed to know. I know you think it's exciting, but I'm scared. What if he finds out? What if Mr. Ellison finds out? Another pause. You're right. We need to be more careful. Maybe we should cool things down for a while. Another pause, longer this time. I don't want to lose you either, but I can't lose everything else. Give me some time to figure this out. She ended the call and crept back to bed, settling on her side with her back to me. I lay there in the darkness, processing what I'd heard. Sam was getting nervous, which meant she might try to end the affair or at least put it on hold. That would complicate my plans, but it also presented an opportunity. If I could create enough pressure at the right moment, I might be able to force them into making mistakes that would expose them completely. I smiled in the darkness. Phase 2 was about to begin. The next morning brought the first crack in their facade. I was drinking coffee in the kitchen when Sam's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and quickly rejected the call, but not before I saw Ryan's name on the screen. Work calling already? I asked casually. Wrong number, she said, but her hands were shaking as she poured her coffee. The phone rang again. This time she turned it off completely. Must be persistent wrong numbers, I observed. Sam forced a laugh. You know how it is with telemarketers. She was cracking under the pressure, and I hadn't even started applying it yet. After Sam left for work, I checked the GPS tracker. Ryan's car was at his apartment complex, not at the office. Interesting. I drove to Coastal Marketing and confirmed that Sam's car was in the parking lot, but Ryan's designated parking space was empty. Through the office windows, I could see Sam at her desk, checking her phone repeatedly. She looked anxious, distracted. Other employees were giving her curious glances. At 10 a.m., Ryan's car finally moved from his apartment to the office. I watched from my vantage point across the street as he entered the building. Within minutes, I could see him in his glass office, gesturing animatedly on his phone. Sam kept looking toward his office, but he didn't acknowledge her. Trouble in paradise. I decided to accelerate the timeline. From my truck, I called Coastal Marketing's main number. Coastal Marketing Solutions, this is Jennifer. How may I help you? Hi, Jennifer. I'm calling about some concerning behavior I witnessed involving one of your employees. Is there a manager I could speak with? What kind of concerning behavior, sir? Well, I'd rather discuss it with a supervisor. It involves inappropriate conduct between a manager and a subordinate. There was a pause long enough for me to picture the woman on the other end deciding whether I sounded credible. I could almost hear the soft clack of keys as she pulled up an internal directory, weighing procedure against the confidence in my voice. Let me transfer you to Mr. Ellison's office. Perfect. The word drifted through my thoughts like a tiny victory banner. A faint click signaled the line transferring, followed by a burst of instrumental hold music and a few seconds of complete silence before I found myself speaking with Mr. Ellison's assistant, a brisk, efficient woman whose clipped tone suggested she was constantly managing 3 calendars at once. In under half a minute, she had arranged a phone appointment for me that afternoon. I gave her a false name and contact number, a prepaid phone I'd bought specifically for this situation, still carrying the light scent of plastic and cheap cardboard from the gas station shelf. As I hung up, the weight of the small disposable phone in my palm felt both reassuring and incriminating. Phase 2 was officially underway. At noon, I drove to the Italian restaurant where Ryan and Sam had been meeting. The sky outside was washed out and overcast, the kind of colorless day that made everything look slightly tired. The restaurant sat on the corner, its green awning faded from years of sun, the windows dressed with white lace curtains that tried and failed to make the place look quaint instead of cramped. Inside, the air was warm and smelled of garlic, simmering tomatoes, and something buttery. Soft piano music played over the low murmur of lunchtime conversations and the occasional clink of silverware. I took a moment to glance around, noting exits, cameras, and the tables tucked away in shadowed corners. People noticed far less than they thought they did. I'd learned that a long time ago. I approached the hostess stand. The hostess, a chatty woman in her 20s with overly shiny lip gloss and a messy bun that looked carefully accidental, greeted me with a bright, practiced smile. It dimmed slightly when she realized I was alone, then warmed again when she saw I was willing to talk. She clearly enjoyed gossip. It practically radiated off her in little sparks of eager curiosity. I'm trying to plan a surprise for my wife, I explained, letting a small, sheepish smile tug at my mouth. She's been coming here with her work colleagues, and I want to make sure I get the same table they usually request. Her eyes lit up immediately. Romance plus a secret, the perfect combination. Oh, what's your wife's name? Maybe I remember her. Sam Harper. Red hair, usually comes in with a tall guy in expensive suits. Recognition flashed across her face like a light switching on. The hostess's expression shifted slightly, her bright smile flattening into something more conspiratorial. She leaned in a little. Oh yes, I remember them. They usually request table 12. It's in the back corner, very private. They seem very close. Close? I echoed, letting my brows knit together in confusion, as if the idea had only just occurred to me and I was doing my best not to overreact. She hesitated for exactly half a second, then gave in to the pull of the story. Well, I don't like to gossip, but they don't act like work colleagues, if you know what I mean. More like, well, like they're having an affair. I let my gaze drift toward the back of the restaurant, pretending to imagine them sitting there, laughing over plates of pasta. In reality, I'd already memorized the layout from photos. I feigned surprise, adding a small, nervous laugh that didn't quite land. Really? That's concerning. My wife mentioned her supervisor was being inappropriate with several employees. The hostess's mouth tightened, moral indignation settling over her features like a mask. I wouldn't be surprised. He's very handsy with her, and she doesn't seem to mind. Last week I saw him kiss her hand when they thought no one was looking. I let a beat of silence stretch between us, long enough for discomfort to creep in. Would you be willing to tell someone in authority about what you've observed? This could be harassment. The question seemed to give her purpose. The hostess nodded enthusiastically, her ponytail bouncing. Absolutely. I hate seeing married women get taken advantage of by their bosses. I thanked her, keeping my voice low and grateful, and left my fake contact information, suggesting she might be called as a witness in a potential investigation. Her eyes flicked to the number and back to my face, as if committing both to memory, pleased to be part of something important. On my way out, I glanced back at table 12. Empty now, its white tablecloth spotless, but I could imagine the ghost impressions of wine glasses, intertwined fingers, and careless laughter. It was a perfect little stage for a scandal. That afternoon, right on schedule, I had my phone conversation with Mr. Ellison. I sat at my kitchen table, laptop open in front of me, notes arranged in neat bullet points. The prepaid phone lay beside them, screen dark, as anonymous as I needed to be. When it buzzed to life, I took a breath, adjusted my posture, and slipped into the role I'd created. I kept my tone professional and concerned, positioning myself as a community member who'd witnessed inappropriate behavior, someone with no personal stake, just a sense of responsibility. Mr. Ellison, I'm calling because I've observed some troubling interactions between one of your supervisors, Ryan Caldwell, and a married employee named Samantha Harper. There was a soft exhale on the other end, followed by a rustle of paper. What kind of interactions? Ellison's voice was cautious but interested, the way people sound when they suspect the worst and are half hoping to be wrong. Intimate dinners at restaurants, hand-holding, kissing, I said evenly. The kind of behavior that suggests a relationship between a supervisor and subordinate. I understand Mr. Caldwell has a history of this kind of conduct at previous employers. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with calculation. I could almost hear him trying to remember HR reports, complaints, anything with Caldwell's name on it. There was a long pause. These are serious allegations, he said finally. Do you have any evidence? I have photographs from a restaurant, I replied. My cursor hovered over the folder on my laptop, as if that could transfer intention through the line. And the hostess there would be willing to provide testimony about their behavior. I also have information about similar incidents at Mr. Caldwell's previous job in Portland. Another brief pause, this one shorter, more resigned. I see. Can you email me this information? Of course. I let just a hint of urgency enter my voice. I should mention that other employees seem to be aware of the relationship. There's been gossip on social media about inappropriate office behavior. I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. We take these matters very seriously. I'm sure you do, I said smoothly. I'd hate to see your company face the kind of liability issues that forced Mr. Caldwell to leave his last job. That landed. Even over the phone, I could feel the shift, the sudden awareness of risk, of lawsuits and headlines and board meetings. After a few more perfunctory assurances, we ended the call. I immediately composed a carefully crafted email to Mr. Ellison, attaching the photos I'd taken of Sam and Ryan at the restaurant, their heads tilted toward each other, his hand brushing her wrist, the intimate bubble of their body language unmistakable. I added screenshots of the social media gossip I'd found, anonymous posts hinting at office romances and after-hours meetings. I also included the contact information for the restaurant hostess and a concise summary of Ryan's employment history, highlighting the convenient gaps and quiet departures. When I clicked send, I watched the progress bar complete and vanish. The email slipped away into the digital ether, a small, silent weapon already in flight. By evening, the pressure was starting to show. According to the GPS tracker, Ryan had left work early and gone to a bar across town, not the Riptide, but a different establishment where he apparently went to drink alone. Sam had also left work early, but instead of going home or to Ryan's apartment, she'd driven to a shopping mall and spent 3 hours walking around aimlessly. When she finally came home at 8 p.m., she looked exhausted and stressed. Rough day at work? I asked, not looking up from the newspaper I was pretending to read. You could say that. She poured herself a large glass of wine and sat at the kitchen table. There are rumors going around the office about inappropriate relationships. What kind of inappropriate relationships? The kind where supervisors get too friendly with their employees. She took a large gulp of wine. Mr. Ellison called a staff meeting this afternoon, said he'd received some complaints and was going to be investigating workplace conduct. I turned a page of the newspaper. Sounds like someone's in trouble. Maybe. Her voice was small, uncertain. Alec, can I ask you something? Sure. Do you think I'm a good person? The question caught me off guard. I looked up from the newspaper and saw genuine vulnerability in her eyes, the first honest emotion she'd shown me in weeks. Why are you asking? I've been making some questionable choices lately. I'm starting to wonder if I'm turning into someone I don't recognize. Here was my chance to offer forgiveness, to try to rebuild our marriage, to take the high road. 6 months ago, I would have seized the opportunity. But too much had happened. Too many lies, too much betrayal, too much disrespect. I think you're going through a phase, I said carefully. People sometimes make mistakes when they're unhappy or confused. What if the mistakes are too big to fix? Then you live with the consequences? She finished her wine in silence, and I went back to pretending to read the newspaper. But I was actually watching her reflection in the window, noting the way her shoulders slumped with defeat. My phone buzzed with a text from Tommy. Got some interesting information about Ryan's gambling debts. Want to meet tomorrow? I typed back, absolutely. Sam went to bed early, claiming she had a headache. I stayed up late, planning the next phase of my campaign, Mr. Ellison's investigation would take a few days to gather momentum. But when it did, It would create exactly the kind of public scandal that would destroy both Ryan's and Sam's reputations. But I wasn't going to stop there. Ryan had a gambling problem and financial difficulties, which made him vulnerable to other kinds of pressure. And Sam's growing guilt and anxiety suggested she was close to a complete breakdown. By the time I was finished with them, they'd both understand exactly what it felt like to have their lives destroyed by someone they'd underestimated. I was no longer the naive husband who'd been blindsided by his wife's affair. I was a man with a plan, and that plan was about to reach its climax. Tommy and I met at a diner outside town, away from prying eyes and familiar faces. He slid a manila folder across the table, his expression grim. "Your boy Ryan is in deeper trouble than we thought," he said. "He owes $47,000 to a bookie in Portland, the kind of guy who doesn't accept payment plans." I opened the folder and scanned the documents inside. Bank records, credit reports, loan applications, a complete financial profile that painted a picture of a man drowning in debt. "How did you get all this?" "I have contacts in the financial industry. Let's leave it at that." Tommy leaned forward. "Alec, this guy is desperate. Desperate people do dangerous things." "What kind of dangerous things?" "The kind where he might try to disappear with someone else's money, or someone else's wife." The implication hit me like a cold slap. "You think he's planning to run?" "I think he's running out of options. His creditors are closing in, his boss is investigating him, and his affair is about to become public knowledge. What would you do in his position?" I studied the financial documents more carefully. Ryan had maxed out 6 credit cards, taken cash advances on 3 others, and defaulted on 2 personal loans. His expensive lifestyle was built on a foundation of borrowed money and false promises. "There's more," Tommy continued. "I did some digging into his previous relationships. The married woman in Portland, she cleaned out her joint bank account before she left her husband, $58,000 gone overnight. And Ryan? Left town 2 weeks later. Coincidence?" The pattern was becoming clear. Ryan didn't just seduce married women for the thrill. He used them to solve his financial problems. Sam wasn't just having an affair. She was being set up for a massive theft. "I need to get to our bank," I said, standing up abruptly. "Already thought of that." Tommy handed me a printout. "I had a friend run a credit check on Sam this morning. She applied for a personal loan yesterday. $50,000. My hands shook as I read the document. Sam had lied about her income, inflated our assets, and forged my signature on the application. If the loan was approved, she'd have access to enough money to disappear with Ryan. "The loan is still pending," Tommy said, "but with her credit score and employment history, it'll probably be approved by tomorrow." I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, watching my entire life crumble into the ocean below. Sam wasn't just cheating on me, she was planning to rob me and disappear. "What do you want to do?" Tommy asked. "I want to destroy both of them." "Legally?" "Completely." We spent the next hour planning a coordinated assault on Ryan's and Sam's lives. Tommy would contact Ryan's creditors and provide them with his current address and employment information. I would call the bank and report the fraudulent loan application. We'd also contact Mr. Ellison with additional evidence of Ryan's financial crimes. But first, I had a more immediate problem to solve. I drove straight to our bank and requested an emergency meeting with the branch manager. Within an hour, I'd frozen all joint accounts, revoked Sam's access to our credit cards, and filed a fraud report about the forged loan application. "Your wife is going to be very unhappy about this," the manager warned. "My wife is going to be very unhappy about a lot of things," I replied. Next, I drove to Coastal Marketing Solutions. Through the office windows, I could see Sam at her desk, looking increasingly agitated. Her phone kept ringing, and each call seemed to make her more upset. Ryan was in his office with the door closed, apparently having an intense conversation with someone. At 3 p.m., Mr. Ellison emerged from the elevator with 2 men in suits, probably corporate investigators or lawyers. They went directly to Ryan's office and closed the door. Within minutes, I could see Ryan gesturing defensively while the investigators took notes. Sam kept looking toward Ryan's office, her face pale with worry. She tried to approach the office several times, but Mr. Ellison's assistant intercepted her each time. At 4 p.m., the investigators emerged from Ryan's office, followed by Ryan himself. He was carrying a cardboard box, the universal symbol of corporate termination. Security guards escorted him to the elevator while his former colleagues watched in stunned silence. Sam jumped up from her desk and tried to follow them, but Mr. Ellison appeared and guided her into a conference room. Through the glass walls, I could see him showing her documents, probably the evidence I'd provided about her relationship with Ryan. Her face went white, then red, then white again. She was trapped, and she knew it. My phone rang. Sam's name appeared on the caller ID. "Alec, I need you to come to my office right now." Her voice was shaking. "There's been a terrible misunderstanding." "What kind of misunderstanding?" "Someone has been spreading lies about me and Ryan. They're saying we were having an affair, but it's not true. You have to help me prove that." The desperation in her voice was almost pitiful. "Sam, I can't help you prove something that isn't true." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I know about the affair. I know about the restaurants, the hotels, the lies. I know about the loan application you filed with my forged signature." Silence. "I know everything, Sam." "Alec, please let me explain." "There's nothing to explain. You made your choices, and now you're living with the consequences." I hung up and turned off my phone. Within an hour, Ryan's BMW was being repossessed from the parking lot outside his apartment complex. I watched from across the street as he argued with the repo men, waving his hands and shouting about payment arrangements. They ignored him and drove away with his car. At 6 p.m., Tommy called with an update. "Ryan's creditors got my message. There are 3 different collection agencies heading to his apartment right now. His gambling debts have been sold to a recovery firm that doesn't mess around, and the IRS got an anonymous tip about unreported income." "What about Sam?" "Mr. Ellison fired her an hour ago. Security escorted her out of the building. Word is, she tried to blame everything on Ryan, said he was harassing her, and she was afraid to report it." "Did anyone believe her?" "Not after they saw the photos of them holding hands at restaurants. Not after the hostess from the Italian place gave her statement. Not after they found the hotel receipts in Ryan's expense reports." The walls were closing in on both of them, exactly as I'd planned. That evening, I waited at home for Sam to return. She arrived at 8 p.m., her face streaked with tears and her professional composure completely shattered. "You did this," she said, standing in the doorway like an avenging angel. "You destroyed my life." "I didn't destroy anything, Sam. I just stopped pretending not to see what you were doing." "You had me investigated. You spied on me. You sabotaged my career." "I protected myself from being robbed by my own wife." She stared at me, and I could see the exact moment when she realized I knew about the loan application. "That's not what it looks like," she said weakly. "It looks like fraud. It looks like you and your boyfriend were planning to steal $50,000 and disappear together. We weren't going to disappear. We were going to pay you back. With what money? Ryan just lost his job, his car, and his apartment. His creditors are circling like vultures. What exactly were you going to pay me back with?" Sam collapsed into a chair, her face in her hands. "You don't understand. Ryan said he had a plan. He said we could start over somewhere else, build a new life together." "Ryan is a con artist who's used the same scheme on at least 2 other married women. You're not special, Sam. You're just the latest mark." The words hit her like physical blows. She looked up at me with something approaching horror. "That's not true." "Ask him." "Oh, wait, you can't. His phone's been disconnected for non-payment." I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a beer, leaving Sam sitting alone in the living room. Through the window, I could see Mrs. Greeley watering her garden and trying not to look too obviously interested in the drama unfolding next door. When I returned to the living room, Sam was gone. Her car was no longer in the driveway. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "She's at Ryan's apartment building, but he's not answering his door." I smiled grimly. My anonymous informant was still looking out for me. An hour later, Sam returned home, looking even more defeated than before. "He's gone," she said quietly. "Ryan's gone. The apartment manager said he moved out this afternoon, left no forwarding address. Shocking." "You were right. About everything." She sat down across from me, her hands folded in her lap like a penitent child. "What happens now?" "Now you live with the consequences of your choices." "Are you going to divorce me?" "That depends." "On what?" "On whether you're planning to fight me or accept responsibility for what you've done." Sam looked around our living room, at the photos of our wedding, the furniture we'd bought together, the life we'd built over 8 years of marriage. "I don't want a divorce," she said finally. "I want to fix this." "Some things can't be fixed, Sam. Some things can only be survived." She started crying then, deep, wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. I watched her fall apart and felt nothing except a cold satisfaction that justice had been served. Ryan Caldwell was ruined, his career destroyed, his debts called in, his assets seized. He'd fled town like the coward he was, leaving behind a trail of financial wreckage and broken promises. Sam had lost her job, her reputation, and her lover. She faced potential criminal charges for loan fraud and would spend years rebuilding her professional credibility, if that was even possible. And me? I was exactly where I'd started, except now I knew exactly what kind of person I'd married. The knowledge was painful, but it was also liberating. I finished my beer and headed toward the bedroom, leaving Sam crying alone in the living room. "Alec," she called after me. I turned back. "I'm sorry for everything." "I know you are, Sam. But sorry doesn't fix anything. Sorry is just the price you pay for making terrible choices." I went to bed alone that night, listening to Sam cry herself to sleep on the living room couch. Outside, Mrs. Greeley's porch light was on, and I could see her silhouette in the window, keeping watch over the neighborhood like a guardian angel. Tomorrow, I'd start figuring out what came next. Tonight, I was content knowing that sometimes the underdog wins, and sometimes justice is served exactly as it should be. The short skirt had been Sam's declaration of independence. In the end, it had become her surrender flag.